What if your dreams are the most honest conversations you have? Welcome to the Archeion, where curiosity becomes knowledge. I'm Asriel. Have you ever had a dream that stayed with you for years? Not because it was frightening, not because it was especially beautiful, just because something about it felt important. I've been thinking about that lately. There are dreams that disappear almost immediately after we wake up. By the time we've made coffee or checked our phone, they're gone. Whatever they were trying to say seems to dissolve into the background of the day. And then there are other dreams, dreams that quietly remain with us. Sometimes we can't even explain why. We don't remember every detail. We couldn't tell someone exactly what happened, but we remember how it felt. It's almost as if some part of us recognizes that the dream mattered, even if our conscious mind doesn't quite understand it. For a long time, I assumed dreams were simply our dreams, our brains doing strange things while we slept. Maybe that's true. But recently, I found myself spending time with Carl Jung's ideas about dreams, particularly in the opening chapter of Modern Man in Search of a Soul. One idea stayed with me long after I closed the book. He suggested that dreams might not be random at all, that perhaps they're one of the ways our unconscious mind tries to communicate with the conscious part of ourselves. And now, I don't know whether that's literally true, and honestly, I don't think that's the most interesting question. The question I've been sitting with is this: what if we've been overlooking one of the few moments in our lives when we stop editing ourselves? Whether we remember our dreams or not, I think most of us recognize the experience of feeling disconnected from ourselves. Life gets busy. There's work, responsibilities, conversations, bills, deadlines, the constant movement of everyday life. We become very good at responding to what's happening around us, but much less practiced at noticing what's happening within us. It's interesting, isn't it? We spend years learning how to communicate with other people, how to explain ourselves, how to defend our opinions, how to present ourselves, but very little time learning how to listen inwardly. Maybe that's why Jung's work still resonates with so many people. Not because everyone agrees with his theories, but because he invites us to become curious about parts of ourselves we normally overlook. Dreams become one possible doorway into that curiosity. Not because they're magical, not because they predict the future, simply because they may reveal emotional truths we're too distracted to notice while we're awake. One of the things Jung points out is that dreams don't communicate the way we do. They don't speak in explanations. Imagine if every dream simply began by saying, "You've been avoiding your grief," or "You're exhausted," or "You're afraid of disappointing people." That would certainly make interpretation easier. But dreams don't seem interested in being efficient. Instead, they tell stories, they create images, they generate feelings. You might dream that you're lost in a city you've never visited, or that you're trying to speak but no sound comes out. Maybe you're running from something you never quite see. Maybe you're standing inside your childhood home even though you haven't thought about it in years. Why stories? Why symbols? Why not simply tell us what's wrong? I've wondered about that. And maybe the answer is that not everything important fits neatly into language. Think about grief for a moment. How would you describe grief to someone who's never experienced it? You could define it, you could explain the stages, you could describe the biology behind emotional pain. But none of that really captures what grief feels like. Sometimes a single image communicates more than an entire paragraph. Maybe dreams speak symbolically because emotions themselves are symbolic. Maybe they reach for pictures because pictures sometimes carry what words cannot. That idea has changed the way I think about dreams. Not because I suddenly believe every dream has one hidden meaning waiting to be decoded, but because it reminds me that there are parts of being human that resist simple explanations. Another idea from Jung that really stayed with me has less to do with dreams themselves and more to do with identity. We all have stories about who we are. I'm responsible. I'm independent. I'm the calm one. I'm the person everyone comes to for advice. Those stories aren't necessarily false. In many cases, they're true, but perhaps they're only part of the truth, because every identity leaves something outside the frame. If you've spent years becoming the strong one, where does your vulnerability go? If you've built your life around being dependable, what happens to the moments when you're overwhelmed? If you've learned to be endlessly optimistic, where does sadness live? Jung believed those rejected parts don't disappear. They simply move outside conscious awareness. I find that fascinating, because I think many of us assume that whatever we're not paying attention to simply stops existing. But life doesn't usually work that way. Ignore an emotion long enough, and it often finds another way to be noticed. Sometimes through irritability, sometimes through anxiety, sometimes through physical exhaustion, and perhaps sometimes through dreams. It's almost like living with roommates inside your own house. Just because you've closed the door doesn't mean nobody's home. The dream might simply be opening that door for a few moments, not to frighten us, just to remind us that there's more inside us than the identity we've become comfortable wearing. One sentence from Jung's work has continued echoing in my mind. The conscious mind keeps living one story. The unconscious keeps trying to restore balance. I really like that word, balance, because it changes the entire relationship we have with dreams. Instead of seeing them as strange interruptions, we might begin seeing them as quiet corrections. Imagine someone who insists they're completely fine, they're productive, they're smiling, they're taking care of everyone else. If you asked them how they're doing, they'd say, I'm good. I've got everything under control. But every night they dream they're drowning. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean the dream predicts anything. It doesn't mean something terrible is about to happen, but perhaps the dream is expressing something emotionally true. Maybe one part of them knows they're overwhelmed before another part is willing to admit it. I actually find that idea deeply compassionate. The unconscious isn't accusing us, it isn't trying to embarrass us. It's almost as if it's saying, I know you've been busy surviving, but don't forget about me. That feels very different from how many of us treat ourselves. We're often harsh, demanding, always asking ourselves to improve, become more productive, more disciplined, more successful. Jung offers another possibility. Maybe the goal isn't perfection, maybe it's wholeness. And I think those are very different things. Perfection usually asks us to eliminate our flaws. Wholeness asks us to acknowledge our humanity, to recognize that strength and fear can exist together. Confidence and uncertainty can exist together. Joy and grief can exist together. Maybe becoming ourselves isn't about adding more qualities. Maybe it's about making room for the ones we've spent years pushing away. Something I appreciate about psychology is that it rarely speaks with one voice. Jung offered one perspective. Others disagreed. Behaviorists, for example, were much less interested in dreams. They believed psychology should focus primarily on observable behavior. Modern neuroscience offers another explanation entirely. Some researchers suggest dreams begin as random neural activity while we sleep. The brain then creates a story afterward. And honestly, I don't think we have to choose one explanation over another. Maybe dreams originate through biology. Maybe they're shaped by memory. Maybe they reflect unconscious emotional processes. Perhaps several of those things happen at once. What interests me most isn't proving which theory is correct. It's noticing what happens when we become curious. Because even if dreams begin as random activity, the meaning we assign to them can still tell us something about ourselves, the questions we ask, the emotions we notice, the stories we create. Those things reveal the dreamer, even if they don't fully explain the dream. So maybe this week, instead of trying to become an expert in dream interpretation, simply become a better observer. If you happen to remember a dream one morning, pause before reaching for your phone. Write down whatever you remember. Not because every dream contains hidden wisdom, but because paying attention changes the relationship we have with ourselves. Instead of asking, what does this symbol mean? Maybe asking, what feeling stayed with me? What in my waking life carries that same feeling? What have I been too busy to notice lately? You might discover nothing. That's okay. You might discover something small. That's okay too. Curiosity doesn't require certainty, it only requires attention. And perhaps attention is one of the kindest things we can offer ourselves. I don't know where dreams come from. Maybe they're expressions of the unconscious. Maybe they're our brain's organizing experience. Maybe there's something we don't yet fully understand. I'm comfortable leaving that question open because I don't think certainty is the point. What matters to me is that dreams remind us there are still parts of ourselves worth discovering, parts that don't always speak through words, parts that quietly wait until we're asleep because that's the only time we'll finally stop interrupting them. So perhaps the next time you wake up from a dream that lingers, instead of asking, what on earth was that? Maybe ask something gentler. What part of me was asking to be heard? Sometimes the most meaningful conversations we'll ever have are the ones we almost forget by morning. If today's conversation resonated with you, you can find the full written article on Asriel's Substack, where each topic is explored in greater depth. If you'd like to continue these conversations, consider subscribing, sharing this episode with someone who might need it, or leaving a review. It truly helps this work reach the people who are looking for it. Until next time, take care of your mind, stay curious, and keep paying attention to the quiet places within yourself.